Welcome to this special episode of Beyond the Books with me, Beth Price. This podcast goes behind the scenes of research in the School of Literatures, Languages and Cultures at the University of Edinburgh, otherwise known as LLC. And today, as well as hearing about some of the research going on, we are talking book prizes. The James Tait Black Prizes are the UK's longest-running literary awards, established in 1919 by Janet Coates, the widow of publisher James Tait Black. The prizes commemorate her husband's love of good books, and they are also the only major book prize judged by scholars and students, with postgraduate students from across LLC assisting staff from the Department of English and Scottish Literature. And it is one of those students that I am talking to today. With prizes for biography and fiction, previous winners that you might have heard of include Angela Carter, Cormac McCarthy, Ian McEwan, Muriel Spark and Zadie Smith for fiction, and Peter Ackroyd, Amit Chaudhry, Richard Ellman and Hermione Lee for biography. And today I am joined by Amanda Fiorani, who is a visiting PhD student, and she is one of the James Tait Black Prize judges for fiction. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for joining me. So we'll talk about the James Tait Black Prizes, but I also want to talk about you and your research. So you're from Brazil,
Yes, that's right.
but you're a visiting student in Edinburgh.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Basically, my research project is on Ben Jonson, who's a modern playwright, and because I wanted to look into the archives, performative archives, it made sense for me to come here and spend some time and do the sort of field work. And I had studied here in the UK before, so I've always wanted to come back to, so that was an opportunity to do that.
So then, is your PhD research similar to your master's?
It's kind of a development from my master's. So my master's is on Ben Jonson in Brazil. So I worked on translations and adaptations and stagings and the whole lot of his works in Brazilian Portuguese. Part of the work was also sort of introducing Ben Jonson to Brazilians, because there was nothing about Ben Jonson in Portuguese. So that took me to a whole approach of looking at his reception over the centuries. And then I found that was really useful as well to figure out what the gap was and what I wanted to pursue in my PhD.
So you did it right, didn't you? The kind of, I have this interest, I found a gap in the research. Oh, look, a perfect PhD project. That's really fun. And so your PhD project is looking at queerness in Ben Jonson's work. So you said he's an early modern playwright. So is that 1600s?
Yes, that's late 1600s. He was born about 10 years after Shakespeare.
What makes his work interesting for looking at queerness, gender, that kind of thing?
At that point, when I sort of discovered Jonson, which was when I studied at Warwick, at first I only heard about the things that he said about Shakespeare, and I was like, oh, his works are really fun as well. And then I kind of, got obsessed. I had already been quite interested in looking at queerness in early modern theatre, and we hear a lot about queerness in Shakespeare's works and so on, not only because of the conventions with the boy actors, but also because of how the plays work out. And when I was looking at the gaps and reading Jonson's works, I could see a real maybe underdeveloped queerness there in the double cross-dressings and this sort of a whole approach of pushing the boundaries in terms of the authorities as well, but also sort of trying to provoke the Puritans and provoke the whole convention that was there, and that he used not as sort of a limitation to his work, but he truly exploited it.
Shakespeare has a lot of cross-dressing, like you say, not just because young boy actors played the female roles, but I'm thinking of the comedies where the twins, it's one boy, one girl, and the male romantic lead is kind of falling in love with the girl dressed as a boy and doesn't know. So is that the same sort of thing that you see in Ben Jonson's plays?
Yes, in some ways. In Epicene, for example, Epicene, the female character, marrying this older man who doesn't really like noise, so she's supposed to be this silent wife. And then once they get married, she starts transforming and really becoming really talkative. But then at the end, we found out that actually she wasn't a woman after all. She was a boy dressed up as a woman in the play. But we know that at that time, that was the case with all the female characters. So that's like one, I think, obvious example of Jonson sort of exploiting what was already the conventions to surprise the spectators and to put tension on how gender is constructed and how gender is performative, really.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Why then did you pick Edinburgh as the university to visit? Why Edinburgh for your PhD?
When I started looking into that angle of looking at queerness in Jonson's works and reading up about what had already been analysed and what had already been written about that, I came across Professor Loxley's work, and his works is a perfect match with my work because he works a lot with the concept of performativity and queer studies in general, and he's an expert in Jonson. So that is a difficult combination to find. And also, on top of that, I had already been to Edinburgh and I loved the city. The city is like really beautiful. I love the literary festival as well. So I was like, okay, I get to maybe live in this like gorgeous city and to be with a supervisor who's an expert in what I do. So that would be perfect.
Ideal. And how have you found living and studying in Edinburgh?
In terms of the city, I've been loving it because I don't live very close to my uni back in Rio, and here I live really close to campus. So that has been like a really great experience to get to really experience the campus. And I also love that Edinburgh is like you can walk everywhere. Here I feel like freer in that way because I feel like I can walk everywhere and I do like walking. But in terms of the university itself, the system is quite different, and that's been like really interesting because in Brazil we do have courses, like mandatory courses that we need to take, which has its pros and cons. It was funny because when I got here, I was like, okay, I was finally done with my courses. Now I get to go and just do my research. And then when I got here, like there were 2 courses that were complete perfect fits for my research, Shakespearean sexualities, and the other one was about performativity with Professor James Loxley. So it was a different experience to get to do courses that were also perfect fits because in that way I felt that they really complemented my research. Whereas back home, I didn't really get lucky with the courses that were available at the beginning. So I didn't get to like truly explore so much of my research in the courses.
So basically, you've enjoyed Edinburgh.
Yes, you can say it.
Good. And one of the things that you've been involved with more recently are these James Tait Black Prizes. Did you know about the James Tait Black Prizes before you started in Edinburgh, or is it something that you heard about while you've been here?
I heard about it while I was already here. I heard about the opportunity, and then I read up about the prize and like all the tradition and so on. I was really impressed to hear about how the prize integrates postgraduate students as well and sort of bridges the gap between academia and the publishing world, because that's not usually the case.
Is that why you wanted to get involved?
In some ways, also because even though I have already plenty to read for my own research, I end up reading a lot of contemporary fiction as well outside of that. And I also love reading books that like get shortlisted for prizes and things like that. So it was not so much directly complementing my own research, but it was definitely complementing my own reading habits outside of my research.
So you're part of the fiction
Yes.
prize. And did you pick fiction over biography because you like reading fiction?
Yes, exactly. I thought that I would have more to contribute to the fiction because I have the habit of reading fiction for like a very long time, and I've been keeping up with recent releases and prizes and so on, more for the fiction. Even though I love biography, I tend to not read it as much. So I thought I would be able to have more to say about the fiction.
This year's shortlist for the James Tait Black Prizes had the highest number of submissions ever, with 300 titles considered in the fiction category and 200 in the biography prize. By the time you're listening to this, the winners will have been announced, but at the time of recording, I don't know who won. In the fiction category, there is Big Kiss Bye Bye by Claire Louise Bennett, which follows a narrator retreating into rural isolation at the end of a fraught relationship. Jackie S.'s Daryl sees a voyeuristic protagonist dealing with his wife's extramarital encounters. Shady Lewis's On the Greenwich Line, translated by Catherine Halls, is a darkly comic novel that examines the moral lives of social workers and the cruelties of the UK's asylum system. Sakina's Kiss, which was written by Vivek Shanbhag and translated by Srinath Perera, follows a middle-class Bengaluru family who are unwittingly drawn into the criminal underbelly of modern India. And Nell Stevens, the original, tells the story of Grace Inderwick, a 19th century woman with a unique ability for forging famous paintings. So Amanda, you've read all of these books now. When did you find out what those books were? Is it about the same time that the shortlist is made public, or do you get them before that?
We did get access to it before.
That's exciting.
It was February, March, it's embargoed, and we're like, okay, I know this big secret and I can't tell anyone. But it was exciting to hear it before everyone else and to kind of take a look at what these works were and see which ones I had heard about before and which ones were completely new to me. And so it was exciting to get that email.
Oh, wow. Okay, so a fair bit before the shortlist goes public.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. And then do you get all of the books at once to read and you just have to start working your way through them?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we were told that they would be available to pick up, and then we had access to physical copies, and then we came to pick them up all at once, which was good also because we had some autonomy as to the order that we wanted to read, and we could go through them just the way we liked.
Have you heard of any of the authors, or have you read any of the authors' work before?
No, which was quite interesting. I had heard about the original before because of just seeing it online, and I knew that it had been nominated for some prizes as well. The other ones, I knew more maybe about the publishers than the books themselves, because I find that I do have some favorite publishers that I try to keep up with what they publish. I'm more inclined maybe to give it a try if it's a favorite publisher, I think.
Were you surprised by any of the books?
Yes, I was quite surprised by the books. I feel like especially on the Grange line, I think because I had seen books by this publisher being talked about quite a lot recently, especially because another book by them had been nominated for, I think, Women's Prize, and they have a very particular kind of covers. There's something that sort of stands out in the way that they do covers that you kind of know that it's by them. But I had never heard of the book. And when you read the blurb, I think that it doesn't really translate into how the book actually is, because the topics that it talks about are quite heavy, but the way that it approaches them is quite surprising. So it is the kind of book that you truly have to experience for yourself, because if people just tell you, oh, it's about this or it's about that, you won't get really the sense of how the book is.
You know what? I have thought that when I've read the blurbs for all of the shortlisted books. I'm like, oh, that might be interesting. But it sounds like they are genuinely interesting and genuinely worth reading.
Yeah, it's truly worth it. I feel like it is the type of book that you read the blurb and you feel like, oh, I need to be in a very specific mindset to kind of read that kind of book, maybe.
Yeah.
But then when you truly read it, just the approach is so refreshing. And the fact, one of the texts I also loved is the fact that even though the author works in the NHS and lives here in the UK, he didn't choose to write in English. He chose to write in his own mother tongue, and the book is translated into English. So I found that detail especially interesting. Even though it's translated work, it feels very British in one way, but it is talking about something that it is to be outside of that as well.
If you'd walked into a bookshop and seen, here are some books that have been shortlisted for this prize, would you pick them up of your own accord?
I feel like some of them, yes. But I also feel very lucky that I pushed myself and put myself in the position to read all of them, because I feel like some I might not have. And then I got to read them and sort of have that experience. It really made me sort of second guess what I think I know about my taste, in books.
Oh, I like that. So you got all of the books in February, March. How did you approach them?
I feel like my approach changed quite a bit throughout the process. To begin with, I thought, okay, I'm going to read the original because maybe that's the one that drew me in because of its themes and because it was also the longest. So I thought, okay, maybe that is the best approach, to just kind of start with the longest and maybe I'll go through it faster because it kind of relates to my interest. And I started really annotating the book, really like every chapter, and it took me a long time to get through the book. It was an enjoyable read, but after that, I felt like it was a bit harder to kind of gather my thoughts as to the whole like piece, because I had like stopped so much throughout my reading to take notes. So I found that maybe that approach wasn't as good, like in the long run. And so for the other books, I tried a different approach and kind of read the whole book and then like sort of went back and annotated it and worked out what I truly thought about it, like looking at from afar after I finished instead of just taking breaks throughout. I found that that worked better because sometimes, although it's interesting to see how you feel about the book as you progress, I feel like some books, they really take you on a journey, and you know, by the time you finish, you kind of look at it in a different way. It felt like I was giving it like the right treatment. It's just sort of read it all and then look at it again and see, okay, what did I think about that? And then going back and like looking at the details of it.
Did you only sit down and talk about the books in that final decision meeting, or were you talking to the judges kind of informally throughout?
I am involved in another project with Forum, the journal, and I found out that one of the judges was also a part of Forum. So that ended up like sparking a conversation, then like an informal conversation, but it was right at the start of the whole process. So it was mostly the last meeting when we had all read all the books and had our thoughts already.
And then in that meeting, were you all kind of ranking the books, or was it this big discussion and then one winner emerged from?
I was quite like curious when we had a date for the meeting about how it would unfold, and it was sort of a big discussion. We went through each book, like we gave it as much time to discuss each and every book without ranking them at first, just everyone giving our thoughts about it. That bit was really interesting because at that point we had pretty much like just been alone with our thoughts about these books, and then once you hear everyone giving their own opinion, I didn't feel like my favorite changed as much, but the other ones, my own sort of ranking of the other ones, I feel like changed a bit from the discussion. And then at the end, we just chose the winner. I feel like by the end, I think everyone kind of had an inkling that it wouldn't be as hard to figure out which one was the winner. I heard from the professors who are in charge that have worked in the other years that it's not usually the case that where it's like such a clear winner, that it was quite different from other years, because usually there is a big sort of debate over like who's going to be the winner and so on. But I feel like just the discussion progressed that way.
You're kind of in English literature, looking at Ben Jonson's plays, but I know that you don't have to be in English lit as a postgrad student to be part of the prizes. You can be from any subject in LLC as long as you have that interest.
Yeah.
And you can kind of contribute something. In the discussion, were people talking about it quite academically, did you feel? Or was it more as readers, as a sort of personal connection to those stories?
I feel like it was a mix between the two. I feel like there was space to talk academically in terms of form and in terms of how it sort of fits into literary traditions and so on. But there was also space to say, oh, I really connected to this book because of this, and talk about your own like personal experience to these books. So I think it varied quite a lot, even though we were 5 judges for the 5 books. And just with the 2 hours, we had enough time to talk about like how we truly felt about the book in like a really like complete way. So there was space to talk about it in both angles. So that was quite interesting.
Would you recommend that next year's lot of PhD students in LLC that they should send that application in?
Yeah, I would highly recommend. I feel like when we are in the PhD, we have this sort of independence with our own research that can sometimes borderline like loneliness as well. You can get like distance from our communities and our peers. And I feel that the prize really stimulated my critical thinking, analytical skills in different way. And it made me go back to my own work, I think, with like fresh eyes. And to have that experience, even though it's right at the end, but to have that experience to interact with other people that also are doing their PhDs and see how they feel about these works and to have that conversation, I felt that was really interesting. Because again, it's us just by ourselves with our own thoughts about our research, or maybe our supervisors and so on. It really made me want to join a book club or something, because I feel like it's the sense of community that we sometimes, especially towards the end, I feel like we really need. So I felt like on top of just being a really interesting work to judge these books, to be a part of like such a tradition, it was also, I think, just being like the sense of community.
My final question is, do you have any advice for people doing a PhD, people thinking about doing a PhD, or maybe people wondering about taking the leap and doing a visiting studentship as part of their PhD?
To start off with, an advice for visiting PhD students, I feel like, is to sort of really push yourself to get out of your comfort zone. And I feel like it's only when I came here that I realized how much we do get comfortable in our like own spaces and our comfort zone and like the space that we usually gravitate towards. And in the PhD, it's the same thing. I feel that it's the time to sort of push yourself to try different things, maybe things that you might not think are even like productive in this time, because I feel like it's a time where we're sort of really stuck with this mindset of like productivity and so on. But it's also the last moment that we're probably gonna like have as students, and to being a part of a university in that way. So I feel like it's really also the time to experiment and to try different things and all of the different opportunities that university offers. So I would say really just try everything.
Yeah, go out of that comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me and for telling me about everything. It's been such an interesting chat.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Thank you for listening to this special episode of Beyond the Books, and congratulations to both of the winners of the James Tait Black Prizes this year, and thank you again to Amanda Fiorani for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more of my conversations with researchers in LLC, you can find the rest of this series on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube. Search for @The University of Edinburgh LLC there. If you head to the university website, which is llc.edu.ac.uk/research/beyond-the-books, you can find not only the rest of this series, but also Series 3, hosted by me, and Series 1 and 2, hosted by Emma Aviett and Ellen Davis-Walker. For now, it's goodbye from me. I have been Beth Price, this has been Beyond the Books, and I have a lot of books that I need to go and read.